Hello and welcome to the newest episode of my guides. Now we have switched topic from economics now to diplomacy. So this chapter with 3 guides in total will be all about diplomacy. This one is the first one. I'm going to start talking about rough changes we have done to the diplomacy department, but basically it's very much the same as in normal EU4. However, there are some things, of course, to talk about. Now, where do we want to start? Let's start with the most simplest thing, basically relations. So if you improve relation to a nation, it's more or less the same as before. So you have all the kind of interactions, like as a great power, you can influence them, and like military accesses and everything like this, knowledge sharing, everything works the same as before. The diplomatic interaction and the covert actions are, of course, unlocked by time and technologies, I mean. So nothing all too fancy about this. But relations are gated behind 2 things, or rather 1 thing in the end. And we have a kind of diplomatic range, how far we can interact with nations. So let's say the Eurat over here is too far away. So there is a diplomatic range, 206 it is for our country. It goes up with DipTech. So there you have some information here in the Empire tooltip here, telling you that each diplomatic technology gives us 3.5 base range. And from our influence, because we are hegemonic, which is the highest importance you can have on the global scale here, we do have a bit of a boost on this. But basically the Eurat here are too far away. So we cannot improve relations with them. We can't guarantee them. We can't make alliances with them. And so on. So basically they are out of reach. Now, this has of course the impact that you can't form alliances with nations too far away. You can't also can't vassalize them, therefore, and these kind of things. So you are really locked into a certain amount of stuff which is relatively close to you. But for example, if you are a colonist nation as I am, so I have managed to get a colony over here in Agrin, which now puts me in range of Spain, for example. So I can interact with them this way because now I'm close enough. Before I wouldn't be able to because it was too far away. So basically, if you, for example, pick in Naples, we probably are still too far away. Yep, so Naples we can't, but Spain we can. And this, of course, limits your alliance network to a certain degree. So, for example, if we look at our map mode here, you can see that we, for example, have an alliance with Songhai here in Western bits just for fun. And not many other relations except our subjects here, more or less. And now the relations also tie into other systems of the mod. Most importantly, trade. So you have the overview what you trade with here in this small card, which shows up after 2 years, I think, in the 58, I think is the 1358 is the first year where it shows up, so you have to wait until you can see this. It tells us, for example, who we trade with. So, for example, let's take here the food trade. We are exporting to Tanglong and Tirone Valley. That's somewhere in India, I assume. Or at least Southeast Asia. And the relations to this province do play a role. So basically, if the relations are good, for example, let's pick Khmer here. Khmer, we have minus 50. That's still okay, but if it goes below minus 100, trade with these realms are first limited, and at some point it's shut down completely. So basically, it's discouraged at some point, and then it's no longer possible if the relations are too hostile. So for example, if the Mamluks here rival us, which they did for a long time in the early game of this campaign, we always made sure that the relations do not go too negative, despite being rivaled here, because the Mamluks and therefore Egypt were a massive food source, but also our path to export all the exotics from India through them, basically. So keep an eye on that if you have trade relations to nations you care about or you need for your own economics. So basically what we mention here is If you play, for example, Bohemia, Poland is a huge source of your salt. So you maybe either want to conquer them or you want to have good relations with them to make sure that you still get your salt from there. Same for the Mediterranean bits where you produce a lot of salt. You want to export it northwards into Central Europe, basically. So that's one thing. And of course, for urban goods, you also maybe want to have good relations with Italy and not annoy them too much, especially if you play in the HIE. Just as some examples here, basically. Same here for getting the spices out of southern India. We should make sure that our relations do not drop too far with Vishyanagar, because they are continuing to conquer stuff here. Yeah, so that's relations in general, but it's pretty much the same as before. There's another feature which is worth mentioning here. Let's take Shama here. We can't. There's somewhere something we can do. Yeah, there is a negotiate alliance button here. So we could negotiate alliances in this mod. Basically, that's circumventing the usual offer alliances. For example, we can't offer an alliance here because they already have the maximum of 2 alliances they can have. However, if our relations would be good enough, we could try to send them an offer here, negotiate, and okay, we have to wait for the 1st of February here. I reloaded the save game basically. Oh, we can't? I thought the event always pops up. Okay, maybe I was mistaken here. I thought the event always shows up if you try this. Okay, maybe we can try it with Bali. No, they don't have... Okay, so basically you get an event where you can still try to negotiate alliance with them. But apparently our relations are too bad to do this. But that's basically another way to get around the alliance limit if they already have 2 alliances in place, or 3 for major nations. And you can still bribe your way into an alliance if you really want to. Which is basically a player-only option. So you can do and use that a bit. And yeah, so that's mostly about relations itself. I mean, we could see if we maybe can do something over here. And we already have something here. Yeah, I don't really have anything where we can try that out right now. So, anything else is basically more or less the same as before. There are some unique pretender rebels, of course. Rebels, not pretender, but rebels in general, which are depending on your religion, for example, and everything which is going on. There are also some things like in your vessels where you have to keep an eye on that they don't rebel too much. Like everything is similar to before as a usual EU4 base game basically. There will be differences in subject types, which will be part of the 2nd episode, so the next one afterwards, where I will go into this in detail because they are quite interesting and important to know because they are connected to the government reforms. But in general, anything else in regards to relations is more or less the same as before. Maybe one small note here is that if you want to, for example, share knowledge here, you will see here they are unable to embrace any of our institutions, which of course has to do with the fact that the limits how you can get institutions in this mod are pretty strict. So for example, you can't spread meritocracy here, or I can't request from China meritocracy because I do not have the requirements for inventing it. So, or spreading it, which means I can't. And therefore, we can't just get some institution as we want to, basically. We have to really make sure that the conditions are there before we can export or import anything. Yeah, and that's basically the key part about the normal relations here. Everything else, you still have the normal interactions here that you can use. And now we are going to talk about the subjects types in general, which will be the 2nd episode because that will be a bit more complicated. So this was a shorter one. See you in the 2nd one when we talk about subject types in general.